The year is 1861, and we find ourselves in southeastern Virginia at the very beginning of summer. The oppressive humidity is just reintroducing itself to the swampland that is Southampton County.
To the humidity, not Southampton County.
Well, maybe. And in a small Virginian town, a crowd has formed along the sides of Main Street all the way to the courthouse. Women in comically large skirts frantically wave flags and throw flowers, while down the center of the street, a parade of young men walk triumphantly amongst the celebratory throng of their neighbors. The young men sport thick gray uniforms and caps, already getting too warm in the Virginia sun, and they hold long rifles at their sides. At the front of them all, a gentleman with a long bushy beard leads them on horseback. His uniform has the extra buttons and falderall of an officer that makes the crowd shout even louder as he passes by. At the courthouse, the man dismounts and walks assuredly up the stairs where the town leaders stand in a huddle, a colorful wreath of flowers in their arms and a freshly sewn Confederate flag. With another thunderous applause from the town, the wreath and the flag are handed to the officer. Tomorrow, they head off to war, but today they celebrate. And they feast on delicacies that none of their hands have made, and houses that none of them built, made for money that none of them labored for.
Whoa.
I'm Karyn Harding.
And I'm Kim McMasters.
And this is Low Ancestry. Welcome, Kim.
Welcome, Karyn.
Let me just start by saying that I think you're going to hate today's story.
I believe you.
Believe women.
Yeah, and I do.
Okay, thank you. Our main character is yet another man. And worse, he's a celebrated Confederate war hero. And our story has all the trappings of the old antebellum South and the lost cause. Two things you notoriously love.
Okay, no. No. I know we do all, jokey bits.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, let the record show.
Just to be clear, I'm going to be angry.
But we knew that with your family history,
yes,
we were going to land here eventually.
Yes, we did.
So we're here to tackle some tough stuff today.
Yeah.
So there'll be some pretty heavy topics in this episode. Listen with care. Today, we're talking about Major Joseph Ezra Gillette of Southampton County, Virginia, your fourth great-grandfather on your dad's side through your grandmother. Joseph Gillette was born on June 26, 1827 to Ezra and Elizabeth Gillette. Kim, would you like to know what else is going on in the world in 1827?
This is my favorite part.
Oh, that's a good energy to bring.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. The TikToks are going to love that.
Hit it.
Laotian King Anuvong leads a famous rebellion against Siam.
Oh.
The first African-American owned and published newspaper in America is founded, Freedom's Journal.
Whoa.
That's what it's called.
Where? Do you know?
I did not write it down, so no.
Okay.
Beethoven dies.
Oh.
And that's that.
Okay.
The first...
That's that.
The first fountain pen is invented.
Okay.
And Joseph Smith will later claim that this was the year he took the famous golden plates, which is important.
Golden plates?
I will not attempt to explain this because I think I'm already on some kind of blacklist for a lot of people. So,
okay.
I don't know.
Look it up.
Look it up. I don't know. They're important, I think.
Okay.
And the only reason I think I know about them is I think they've talked about it in Real Housewives of Salt Lake City.
Which is a really critical primary source that we use for the podcast.
Everything I know about Mormonism comes from Heather Gay.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk a little bit about the history of the Gillette family before I get going, because I think it's interesting.
Sure.
And no, there's no connection to the good razors.
And that I'm fine with that one.
Yeah, that's okay.
That's okay.
You're
We'll
not
let
worried
one
about
pass.
that.
Jim Beam's still a little like, but this one.
But you don't need
That's
Gillette
okay.
razors in the repertoire.
Mm-mm.
Great. Seeing as Joseph is later lauded as a Confederate hero, and he even names his son Jefferson Davis Gillette in the name of the cause, It might surprise you to know that the Gillette family is a northern family.
Now, how do we get here?
I'm so glad you asked because I have it written down. How we got here. Yes, that's right. Joseph's father, Ezra, was nothing more than a stinky Yank. And he was from a place called Lyme, Connecticut. So Ezra, during his lifetime, actually moves to Southampton, Virginia from Connecticut sometime in the early 1820s. And this isn't just interesting because of, the irony of how it all turns out. This is interesting because it's not a normal migratory pattern for someone during this time. The Gillettes had no family connection that I'm aware of anywhere in the South. And if a kid from New England was going to make a name for himself away from his family home during the early 19th century, he's probably going to head west to like New York or Pennsylvania, maybe even Ohio or something if he's really crazy. Those are the frontier spaces for people coming from New England. And that's where they would have the most luck getting land or like making something of themselves. So instead, Ezra did something I've never seen in my like genealogy studies, which is he moved to an already like long established area in Virginia instead of, like a newly founded area. The Gillette family had been in Connecticut for a really long time before Ezra, since May 30th, 1630, to be exact.
Wowza.
Very specific.
Whoa.
They came on a ship called Mary and John.
Okay.
And Mary and John was a ship that made the trip back and forth from England like a few times. And it brought just a crap ton of Puritan families from England so that they could found new towns in Massachusetts. Yes. So these Puritan families were meant to found new towns in Massachusetts and Connecticut on the Massachusetts tribal land. The Gillette that came in 1630, his name was Jonathan Gillette, and he and his brother Nathan came to America together. And going to a new country in the name of religious persecution was nothing new for the Gillette boys, because Jonathan and Nathan's grandfather, his name was Jacques de Gillette, he had started the tradition in the 1500s because Jacques de Gillette was a Huguenot reverend.
Whoa.
Jacques de Gillette, he left France to arrive in England very shortly after the events of the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre, when a lot of Huguenots were slaughtered for being Protestant on Valentine's Day, I believe it was. This was a very famous event in history that sort of sparked one of the first refugee fleeing to other countries of the Huguenots. In England, Jacques' son William was also a reverend, but then William's sons, Jonathan and Nathan, became separatists, and they left England to do Puritan things in New England. After that, the Gillettes were in Connecticut and helped to found a couple of towns, and they fought in all the big wars. In fact, Ezra's grandfather, Jonathan, was a Revolutionary War soldier, and he was a British prisoner for a time. And then one other of Ezra's ancestors died in King Philip's War, which was a horrible war against the native people. And they were all doing very famous New England stuff for about 200 years before Ezra decided the South was calling him.
Can I just tell you how grave my assumptions are about his motivations to move to the South?
Well, we don't know his motivations.
I know, but I'm doing a hop and a skip and a jump.
Yeah, you're already suspicious.
Yeah, well, I know how it ends, so to speak.
So we don't know why he came to Southampton. We do know his profession. He was a school teacher. And I sort of wonder if that had something to do with the move. Like maybe there was a place in Southampton that was looking for a teacher and he applied for the position. So that's very possible. It wasn't long after he moved that he ended up marrying Joseph's mother, Elizabeth Murdaugh. And he married her and then moved into her family's home, which is known as Cedar Lawn. It was the large family farm. Cedar Lawn was where Joseph was born and where he grew up. But unfortunately for him, his father passes away close to a year after he's born. So he never knew his Yankee father. He grows up all Southern. And Cedar Lawn happened to be a very Southern farm in that the family enslaved people to run it. So Joseph grew up around enslaved people and around the practice of enslaving people. So in 1820, a handful of years before Joseph was born, Elizabeth's father enslaved 14 people at Cedar Lawn. And unfortunately, I do not have a list of names for them. I just know that there were 14 people there. And we know that Elizabeth gets married again when Joseph is around 10 in 1838 to a man named William Peel. who in the 1840 census was enslaving 22 people at what we assume is also Cedar Lawn. And then Joseph eventually inherits Cedar Lawn, and he is listed as a slaveholder on the 1860 slave schedule, which is actually a census that they did for enslaved people in America. Some of the schedules would write their names, but most of them didn't even write their names. They just noted it was like their age, their gender, and then their race. So in the 1860 schedule for Cedar Lawn, there's once again 22 enslaved people, just like there were in 1840. Some context here from my understanding of like how these economies worked in the South, upper middle class family might have around 5 to 10 people that they were enslaving. So 22 people is a significant number to show that there was like wealth in this family for sure. And despite not having their names on this 1860 schedule, I do think it's really important for us to like super emphasize that these were 22 human beings deserving of a full and meaningful life to be written about in the same way that history writes about their enslaver, Joseph Gillette. So it's really easy to look at these 22 like anonymous marks on a paper and not equate each of those marks with lives lived. So while we can't read their names, Kim, do you feel comfortable reading each of their ages and gender?
Sure.
It's kind of like the least we can do to acknowledge that they were there.
22, there's a 40-year-old male, a 50-year-old male, a 40-year-old male, 55-year-old male, 21-year-old male, 17-year-old male, 14-year-old male, another 14? 12, maybe? 12? 3-year-old male, 10-year-old male, 3-year-old male, 1-year-old male. And then there's a 30-year-old female, 45-year-old female, 30-year-old female, 25-year-old female, 23-year-old female, 13-year-old female, 4-year-old female, man, 2-year-old female, 6-month-old female, and a 1-year-old male.
It's very like jarring to just have these like 22 individuals like listed right in a row, like one after another.
Knowing how much more, I don't know exactly how specific it is, but knowing that like upper middle class families had 5 to 10 slaves and this family had 22 is just like,
yeah,
really troublesome.
Further context,
which is like the smallest way that I can say what I'm feeling right now. I just need to acknowledge that like,
yeah,
I'm holding back a lot.
Well, there's like a vastness to the cruelty.
Yeah.
The like higher the number goes.
Breaking them out one by one, even if it is just age and gender, is also a very helpful way to like emphasize that it's like, no, these are individual human beings at like different points of life. It's not just 22 dots on like a, graph or whatever.
Yeah. Some further context. I don't know if you noticed, but like on the right, the very far left column, there's a number 1, a number 2, and a number 3. That column actually signifies the number of slave houses. So that means there are only 3 houses in which all of these 22 people are living. And that indicates like who lived in which house. So we knew that doing your season meant that we were going to be here at some point. And now that we are here talking about, this is just one family in your very Virginia like family tree. Now that we're here kind of talking about what that means, are there any thoughts or feelings that you have been thinking about in regards to your ancestors enslaving people since like we've kind of been preparing about like for this since we knew that we were going to do this season? How are you feeling? Like, are there any thoughts that you have?
How am I feeling? Feeling super bad.
Good.
Which like surely isn't a surprise. Hopefully. It just is so difficult to think about anyone being in a position where they're owning human beings and being like, I'm just cool with this. And in fact, I'm so cool with it that I'm going to choose to fight for it to stay that way is like just unfathomable. And I think for the longest time, maybe that's why I like didn't really care about history also, especially with like my family, knowing for some time that this was like, likely the case in my family history, is just like, I don't relate to this in the slightest. So it's so weird to be like, no. If my family owned 22 human beings, that has afforded so much privilege down the line of my family. That was like, these lives were suppressed, ruined, destroyed, not owned by the people living them. Like, that is just, I mean, duh,
Yeah.
but like,
Yeah.
sucks. It sucks. And it doesn't suck because I'm like embarrassed. I mean, I'm ashamed, obviously, but it's not like the kind of thing where it's like, it sucks and I don't want to talk about it. It sucks because like our family should be acknowledging this, and this should be part of maybe our discourse in a way that it certainly is not. And I kind of would like to open up discussions with my family to be like, hey, let's take a look-see and see what we did and how we got here and what we need to be doing right now to ensure that we're not going back to really, really bad, scary times. So it's motivating in a way that hurts. It's devastating. And it's also just infuriating. It's so infuriating.
Yeah.
And I'm trying not to do, I don't know. I'm just trying to sit with it a little bit more than like write it off, which I'm very inclined to do. My gut is like, don't think about this, because thinking about it is like horrendous and awful and something that you can't even process. But I'm trying to just sit with it. And it's uncomfortable, but we like that.
Well, we don't like it.
Well, we like staying in that. We grow from that.
We grow from that. Yeah. Obviously, in the interview that you did with me, I talked about sitting in that discomfort, making that personal connection to something very difficult is so hard to do, which is why the inclination to just be like, he owned people that happened. Ugh, and then like move on from it.
Or like, quote, it was a different time.
It was a different time. Yeah.
No, we're not doing that anymore.
Correct. It's difficult because it was a horrible thing that happened.
Yeah.
And it's a horrible thing that didn't just happen. It was perpetrated by people. Who was it perpetrated by? The people who came before us.
And it was intentional. It was continuous. It wasn't a one-off mistake. It was a full ongoing lifestyle choice.
Yes.
That's an important thing to think about. Yeah. It just every day woke up and said, yes, I own 22 people, and lived with that and was fine with it.
Celebrated it. I know it doesn't feel good, but we do have to get back to our story. We'll explore some more of these feelings, more of these themes as we go along.
Yeah.
But to back up a little, Joseph gets married before this. He gets married in 1849. He gets married to a woman named Emmeline Edith Worrell. She's from another Southampton family. Kim, would you like to see a picture of Joseph and Emmeline?
Oh, I got so excited about a picture, but now I remember who I'm seeing a picture of, and I'm like, ugh.
Yeah,
but yes,
I think remember that. Yeah. So both of these people participated in some pretty heinous stuff.
Mm-hmm. You know who he kind of looks like on the left? He kind of looks like James Kennedy.
Oh my God. He looks like Civil War James Kennedy.
He looks like Civil War James Kennedy. It's for the VPR freaks in the audience. It's Lincoln a little bit. The styling.
It's like Great Value Lincoln.
Yeah, the styling is Big Lots Lincoln.
Mm-hmm.
What's her name? Remind me?
Emmeline.
Looks really sad.
Yeah, she doesn't look good.
She doesn't look great. She looks extremely sad. This is not a photo.
Hers is a portrait.
Okay.
His is a photo.
Yeah. His is very grainy. Great. I don't care.
Yeah.
Whatever. Hers is a sad portrait of a sad woman.
Yeah. She doesn't seem happy at all. I know none of them like smiled, but there's like a deep haggardness to her. Yeah.
Yeah. There's also like, maybe this is just me making things up, and maybe this is because a lot of white people look exactly the same. There's a part of me that's like, is there some resemblance to my family on that side that I'm kind of seeing a little bit?
Are you?
Maybe.
She's got a bit of a like wax candle face.
Well, it's also a portrait.
Oh, that's not what skin looks like?
Yeah. Okay, fine. Whatever. Can you tell me at all if it's like, why does he have a photo and she just has a portrait?
Because he's a war hero.
Okay.
Although, which would you rather have, honestly, a portrait or a photo?
Probably a portrait, but
Yeah.
still.
It's like a built-in filter.
Yeah, I suppose that's true. I was like, okay, is there some injustice
he's more
here?
important. Yeah, there is injustice.
Yeah.
But to be fair, honestly, like, we don't know if she had a photo or not.
Mhm.
Like, these things get passed down to
Sure.
descendants. And so if someone doesn't digitize it, then it's
Yeah.
just in like a dusty attic somewhere.
Right,
So
right.
okay, so Joseph and Emmeline.
Emmeline.
Yes.
How do you spell it?
Emeline.
Oh, okay.
So they begin their family pretty quickly. And one source I read said that they had 6 children. I only found the record for 5 children. They had 4 boys and 1 girl, the girl being your 3rd great-grandmother, Betty. And as I mentioned at the top, it was actually just 7 days after the Civil War begins. Joseph and Emmeline have their 5th child, and they name him Jefferson Davis Gillette in honor of the newly seceded South. 7 days after the Civil War begins. That's enthusiasm. Kim, this child, born at the dawn of war
Mhm.
and named for the leader of the rebel cause, actually dies in October 1864, just a few months before the end of the war. And listen, I'd like to bravely come out as someone who is anti-children dying.
Yes.
All I'm pointing out right now is that it's symbolically very grim.
Yeah.
Born in 1861, named after the president, dies in 1864.
Died how? Do you know?
I don't know.
Interesting.
So this gets us into Joseph's politics a little bit.
Mhm.
From all accounts, Joseph was an avid secessionist and a Democrat. Apparently, he participated in many Democratic conventions in Norfolk. And in 1860, he was actually appointed Justice of the Peace for the county by the Virginia governor at the time.
Mm.
And as a quick reminder / history lesson, the Democratic Party in the 19th century had its roots in Andrew Jackson's politics, which was very anti-big government, and it was pro-agrarian, like farmers. So that lent itself to being the party of slave owners and the main party of the South and the secessionists. It wasn't until after the Industrial Revolution at the end of the 19th century and then the Civil Rights era in the 1960s that cemented Democrats as the party that fought big business and advocated for social justice and social programs.
Got it. I was going to ask.
Now you know.
You knew.
But if you're interested in the history of American politics, Kim, and as it relates to your ancestry,
Mm-hmm.
then just you wait, because next month we're going to do a deep dive into this very topic, and it's very exciting. Get excited. Look more excited.
Is it? I'm very excited.
Yeah. But Joseph, he does. He loves politics. He's very interested in it.
Great.
And it seems clear that he was interested in the larger political discourse going on at the time. Even more clearly, seems like he was pretty jazzed about the new Confederate States of America. And to add some extra context, Nat Turner and the rebellion that he led was in Southampton County. For those who don't know,
Mm.
Nat Turner, do you know who Nat Turner is?
Yes, but give me the refresher.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Nat Turner was an enslaved person and a preacher, and he led a rebellion of enslaved people in 1831, killing 55 white men, women, and children. Within a couple of days, the revolt had been all but squashed by an organized resistance, and a dozen Black people were killed without trial. And then later, they had trials for the rest of the alleged participants. And in total, 30 enslaved people and 1 free Black man were condemned to death, with 19 of them executed. Slave owners also received compensation from the state for anyone that was executed that they had enslaved.
Mm-hmm.
So Nat Turner himself, he eluded the law for a time, but he was captured too. And he was executed in November of 1831 after a trial. But before he was killed, a local lawyer wrote down Nat Turner's confessions in prison. And that text was published not long after as the Confessions of Nat Turner. And that was a very important text for abolitionists, for the abolitionist movement moving into the Civil War. The rebellion itself was a huge political topic all around the country, but it literally happened in Joseph's backyard around when he was like 4 or 5 years old. And since we know that Joseph was very pro-Confederacy, I don't think it's like a huge jump to think that his fervor for the cause comes in no small part from the way his local community thought about Nat Turner's rebellion. It was this major national event that was powerfully divisive. And for those who were experiencing it, it cemented that the violent practice of slavery and subjugation of Black bodies was justifiable because look at what they did. They did the unthinkable and murdered white people, the greatest crime that they could commit. So it like cemented this idea that their way of life was correct. Something like that, you know, could even delude a large population of a country to think that fighting to keep slavery was noble or a just cause to fight for, which like,
oh,
yeah. Yeah, there's so many like...
There are a lot of things I want to say.
There's so many through lines to the current moment.
So many through lines. I was just thinking about like the way that we treat police murders when it's a white person versus a Black person, or like it hasn't changed.
Well, I mean,
like it has, but barely
for
years and years and years.
The ideology hasn't changed, and I think this is even more noticeable in how we're treating the status of immigrant right now in this country, where all of a sudden every single person who is an immigrant, who is brown, has to be deported and sent to a gulag in El Salvador under the pretense that white Americans are in peril if we don't hurt other people.
Right.
I don't know if I'm going to include this, but that is like
I think you should.
Yeah. It's such a clear through line of the same thinking, the same ideology, the same framework.
And you mentioned, was it 30 enslaved people were killed? I think I can't remember the exact
30,
numbers, but you did mention like alleged people involved in the rebellion. Like you are as involved in the rebellion as the nearest white law enforcer says you are.
And you are as much a part of a gang as the nearest ICE officer says that you are.
Which is really freaky.
Yeah.
It's really freaky.
Yeah.
It's a heck of a way to say it, but that's all that I think I can say on the podcast.
This is a heavy episode.
It's a really heavy episode.
So I cannot stress enough how jazzed Joseph was about the new Confederacy. In fact, he activated and organized the Southampton, Virginia cavalry for the whole county on the front lawn of his very home, Cedar Lawn. And he did this in May 1861, where he was elected captain of the cavalry. So apparently over the course of the next few months, the local boys of Southampton did their little drills in front of Joseph's house, and they rode their little horses and practiced with their big boy weapons. And because it
little horses?
Probably. But because it was at Joseph's house, I really cannot stop picturing like these like boys playing at war and Joseph's wife probably bringing them all lemonade and
and cookies.
Not
made by her.
Well, the darker flip side of that is that Joseph and his buddies are practicing violence every single day for a month to participate in a war that was meant to keep people enslaved. And they're doing that every day in front of the people that Joseph enslaved. And the lemonade wouldn't be brought out by his wife. They would be brought out by the enslaved people. And it would have been made by them. So they would have been feeding the very men who were trying so hard to keep them enslaved. And eventually, Joseph's cavalry is called to join the Confederate Army, and they're meant to meet up with everyone in Smithfield, Virginia. But before they leave Southampton, Franklin, Virginia has a big parade on Main Street for all the boys in the cavalry, along with some troops from Georgia that had come up. And at this parade, Joseph was presented with a wreath and a flag for their little troop. And the flag was made by the ladies group of Southampton County. Kim, would you like to see Joseph in his little war costume?
Whoop-de-doo. I love that in order to like diminish this man in a way that feels suitable, all we can say is little.
Well, the thing is like so much of this, actually so much of history can be boiled down to like little boys being like, I want to do war. I want to
Civil War reenactment. That's exactly what it is. Y'all are LARPing. That's all it is.
Yeah, I want to play my little guns and ride my horses with my friends.
And for why?
And then ruin people's lives.
Yes.
Yeah. Fun.
Fun.
Here he is in his costume.
He looks scary. He kind of looks like Rasputin from
He looks very much like Rasputin.
the animated Anastasia.
Yeah.
And he does have, now this is interesting, and I might, spoiler alert, do an episode about this, but he does have a berries and cream
Gotta have
haircut
it.
similar to Brantley Corbin from season 1.
Bartley.
Bartley. What did I say?
You said Brantley?
Which sounds Bartley.
Brantley sounds like what a Mormon mom would name their child.
Yeah, Brantleigh. Bartley Corbin, which I mean, it seems like there were only like 2 hairstyles maybe for men back then.
Mm-hmm.
Big old beard, piece of trash.
Yes. Yeah, the lighting is very shadowy
Mm-hmm.
and malevolent.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's time for the cavalry march to war. And they march all the way to Smithfield, Virginia. And I did not double check this fact, but one historian says that Joseph's cavalry was met in Smithfield with mint juleps and much good food. Quote. On top of that, we know that most men in the company, including Joseph, brought one personal enslaved person with them to war so that they wouldn't have to do their own chores. I don't know who it was that Joseph brought with him, but can you even imagine being forced to pamper a man actively fighting to keep your human rights from you and risking your life for it, being brought to war zones for it? It's sick.
It's disgusting.
It's so sick. I would actually love to learn more about who these people were, if there are any vignettes or stories about the enslaved people who had to go to war with these people. I would love to know more of their stories. I bet they're out there.
Can you remind me and us about the 1,000 Names Project?
I think it's
10,000?
maybe even 10 million names.
10 million names. Why did I think it was 1,000 names?
Because I've said that multiple times wrongly and incorrectly.
Okay, let's get that corrected.
It's 10 million names.
10 million names.
And it's a project where, as we learn the names of enslaved individuals in the past, you are able to self-contribute that information to this project so that we're aggregating the most amount of information of the people who lived during this time as enslaved people. And it's a great resource for African American history and public history education and stuff. They're a really good group. So I feel like these Confederate soldiers had no idea what war was. They're getting waited on while they eat and drink with their friends. It's very surreal. Boys playing pretend, as we said. But eventually it did become real. They trained a little more at Smithfield, and then the Southampton Cavalry got redesignated as Company H of the 5th Virginia Cavalry. And then for a while, the company was doing just patrol duty in the southeast counties of Virginia. It's just marching around in uniform in their own backyard. But they did do a little infantry support in North Carolina. That was before they come back to Virginia and they become the Company A of the 13th Virginia Cavalry and start participating in some of the skirmishes around Richmond, Virginia. And one of their first big battles was the Battle of Fredericksburg of December 1862.
Wow.
So I'm not going to get too detailed about battles in this episode, mostly because I think
Thank you.
battle strats and war are so boring.
So boring and unnecessary.
But we do need to have a little bit of context here. So bear with me. A little bit of ovaries?
A little bit of ovaries?
A little bit of ovaries would be really great to this story.
Can we get a few more ovaries, please?
Please. But as a little overview, the Battle of Fredericksburg was the largest battle of the war, in that there were the most number of soldiers fighting, around 200,000 total. General McClellan of the Union was chasing Robert E. Lee and needed to cross a river to get to Richmond to take the capital. Robert E. Lee didn't like that. So he needed to keep the Union troops on the other side of the river. He did, and the Confederates won. However, it was the deadliest battle with 18,500 casualties, 12,500 of them being Union casualties. So it was a huge loss for the Union.
Dang.
And someone important for Joseph's regiment got severely wounded in this battle. His name was Lieutenant Colonel Jefferson Curl Phillips.
Curl?
Curl.
C-U-R-L?
With an E at the end to make it look fancy.
Curly.
He was leading them. And he got unhorsed and was in the fray manually, and he got severely injured.
Oof.
And without a leader, Joseph actually gets told to take command, and his regiment makes it through the battle victorious. So he's literally promoted in the middle of battle. They come out victorious with the rest of the Confederates. And as a successful show of leadership, Joseph gets promoted to major officially. And this battle actually gives the Confederacy a lot of momentum all the way around. If the Union had won Fredericksburg, I actually think there's a good chance that the war would not have gone on for 2.5 more years. But it did. And with all that momentum, Robert E. Lee, I can see your eyes glazing over.
No, not glazing over, just really disappointed.
I know, but they win the war eventually.
Yeah, I know how it ends. It's still just this feeling of like, I don't know. We'll get to it in my resonance.
Yeah.
I promise I'm paying attention.
Yeah, you're like listing what your resonance is going to be.
Just like there's just a slew of curse words.
Cool.
Yeah.
Robert E. Lee wants to like take this momentum and do another northern invasion about it. And the army makes its way to Culpeper County, Joseph's regiment with them. And again, I don't care about war tactics, so I'll be brief. But while the Confederates were moving towards Shenandoah, Union troops spotted them and tried to block their progress. So one of the ways of doing that was trying to pick off the Confederate cavalries and doing like a 2-pronged attack from like 2 sides of the cavalry. One of those attacks was at a place called Brandy Station, where Joseph and his boys were.
When you say boys, are we saying boys in the same way we were talking about Doge?
Yeah, like little interns.
Like little teeny broccoli heads?
Yeah, probably.
Okay, great. That helps.
The whole battle lasted around 14 hours, and the Confederates successfully held the Union off, but not without loss. Your boy was shot in the chest during battle.
Sheesh.
But he didn't die right away.
Oh, man.
He suffered.
Okay.
No, he was taken back home to Cedar Lawn, and then he died a few months later of the wound in November 1863. For the rest of the family, the war ends, the Confederates lose. Emmeline marries again a decade later. The children grow up, including Betty, who marries your 3rd great-grandfather, Caleb Everett. And everyone, despite losing the war, turns out just fine and is not just ruined by it. Now, not quite the end of our story, although our main character has died. But just like the lost cause that Joseph fought for, the South will not let it die. Part of the reason I chose this story is not because I'm like really into the history of famous Civil War officers. It's because Joseph Gillette is this perfect exemplification of the lost cause and its relationship to genealogy. Kim, do you want to take a stab at a definition of the lost cause?
No, I don't.
Great. And we don't have to.
I really don't. I feel like I've probably tried to do this before. I need to acknowledge now a specific shout out that we got from a listener recently, which was my brother, who gave me an enormous amount of shit for not knowing certain things.
Like what?
He just said, like, I'm really disappointed in how little you know about history. And you know what? That's true. And I've been preparing for this by saying in my head, you're good at math. You're good at math. You're good at math. So while I am extremely insecure and I have terrible memory and I hate history, I don't know all the things that I should probably know. I got a perfect score in my math section of the SAT.
That's really cool.
And I'm going to hang on to that until the day I die.
Yeah, and you should.
So every time you quiz me, I'm going to freak out. But
always remember
the numbers.
Always remember math was a perfect score.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But no, I wouldn't dare. You go ahead.
Okay. I'll take it from here. Broadly speaking, the Lost Cause is a movement post-Civil War by the South to frame their political stance and fight in the Civil War as a positive, noble cause. And this messaging was in part due to some PR damage control on a section of the nation that was now considered just full of rebels who tried to overthrow the American government.
Rebels.
And the other part of it was to be able to justify the over 300,000 Southern lives lost in the war. As in, they didn't die for nothing. They died for this noble, wonderful thing. And the Lost Cause was an extremely purposeful movement. So even the name The Lost Cause was coined by the Confederates and the secessionists. It was first used in a book written in 1866. The war has just ended. A man from Richmond named Edward Pollard, his book was titled The Lost Cause, and it very purposefully distanced the Confederacy from slavery. Literally right after the war has ended,
That surprises me.
I think like I did I would say cursory research about this. Like people make whole theses off of this.
Yeah.
So I don't want to come across as knowledgeable. I think my understanding of this is that there was such animosity even after the war ended between the North and the South. This was causing huge problems. We know in the West that there were still like skirmishes and things that were not ending. And there was just such a rift in the nation that they knew they had lost, slavery had finished, and they needed a way to distance themselves from this like villain role that they had by the Union, which controlled the United States, if that makes sense. So slavery was one of those things that like we lost. Now we have to distance ourselves from the thing that they're mad at us for.
It does feel like extremely strategic PR.
Yes.
Which is really wild to think about.
I think it is. I think it's even more than like we've realized.
Yeah.
Like, based on the cursory like research I've done about it. The Lost Cause is made up of 6 important pillars. And by pillars, I mean bald-faced lies.
Yep.
So number 1, secession had nothing to do with slavery. It was about states' rights. Number 2, slavery was actually a positive thing, and slaves appreciated their lives and the protection slavery afforded. Number 3, the South was only defeated because the North had more numbers and more resources. So in a way, it was doomed from the start, ergo the Lost Cause. Number 4, Confederate soldiers were all noble, gallant, and saintly. Or even in surrender. Number 5, Robert E. Lee is the ultimate sanctified symbol of the cause. Number 6, Southern women sacrificed more than their Northern counterparts to contribute to the war efforts and are the picture of saintly womanhood. So these pillars are like how we look back on the Lost Cause and talk about it and research it. Like these are the tenets.
Yeah.
While the Lost Cause was very purposeful and there was like a strategy for it, they obviously weren't like in their little meeting writing these 6 pillars. But this is what we know to have propped up the Lost Cause efforts. So all of these beliefs and the alterations of history allowed Southerners to not only minimize their vilification and their loss, but it steadily snowballed into the glorification of the Confederacy. So as early as 1869, Confederate veterans created the Southern Historical Society. And throughout the Reconstruction era, books and journals are being written by Southerners as historical texts with the Lost Cause as the central theme. And Southern women began to transform their like war aid organizations into memorial organizations. And because women were not seen as political during this time, it was easier for them to lead memorialization efforts as well as the Lost Cause education outreach efforts. So they're the ones who really spread the Lost Cause and really like cemented it as what it was. But it wasn't until the 1890s that the cause like really built up steam. By this time, free, formerly enslaved people were building lives 30 years after the war. Black universities like Tuskegee University were thriving. Black commerce here in Richmond, like in Jackson Ward, was thriving. And we see a correlation between this economic rise of Black folks and the boom of Lost Cause efforts. It's very intentional. So, for example, in the 1890s, both the Daughters of the Confederacy and the Sons of the Confederacy are formed. The famous gigantic Robert E. Lee statue here in Richmond is also built in the 1890s. And then the Lost Cause memorialization and the fervor continues to build into the 20th century alongside Jim Crow laws and the reemergence of the KKK. And I bring all of this up, not just because Joseph Gillette was a Confederate officer and therefore he's like inherently part of the Lost Cause. I bring it up because he has his own place in Southampton County Lost Cause. In the 1890s, when the Sons of the Confederacy is born, Southampton founds their own chapter of the club. Is it a club?
I think so. I think it's like the He-Man Woman Haters Club from Little Rascals. So. I'm pretty sure that's it.
Woman Haters Club. They call this chapter the Urquhart Gillette Camp, named after the 2 highest ranking members.
What? Sorry, I just like, that's so pretentious.
Yeah, it's named after the two highest ranking members of the Confederacy from Southampton.
Dang.
So Major Charles Urquhart, I think is how you pronounce his name, and then Major Joseph Gillette. In 1902, Southampton citizens erect a monument in front of the courthouse commemorating the dead from the county to include Gillette. And in 1991, the Urquhart Gillette chapter restores the Gillette family cemetery at Cedar Lawn, and they erect a plaque commemorating the major and his family. And the Sons of the Confederacy chapter is still functioning today, participating in local events like parades, reenactments, and so forth to venerate Confederates like Joseph Gillette. And before I get to our resonances, Kim, because we're finally almost done, I'll leave you with a little bit of levity, some karmic justice, if you will.
This is a relief.
In 2008, 3 young men were arrested in Southampton County for desecrating Major Joseph Ezra Gillette's final resting place. No definitive reason was given for their motive, but we do know that they destroyed the sepulcher that was there.
What's that?
I think it's like a type of monument, like stone monument.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And they dug 4 feet into Joseph's grave in what looked like an attempt to reach his remains. They did not actually reach his remains. They were convicted and went to jail for like not that long, but yeah.
Wow.
I know. It was, when I was researching this story, this came up like very early on because I was researching newspapers, and almost immediately there was a bunch of stuff like men dug up a grave. And it was his. Yeah.
All right.
It's nice to know that Joseph didn't get peace.
Yeah, he's not resting easy.
There's something nice about that.
Yeah, there's something nice about that.
Okay, resonances. I'll go first because I know you have a lot of feelings.
I have a lot of feelings, and we're gonna just stumble through them.
We're gonna stumble through them.
Yeah.
I'll go through mine first, even though I could have gone crazy. This episode was not difficult to find evidence for. Like, it wasn't difficult to research.
Yeah.
Emotionally difficult, but it wasn't hard to find stuff. There's been over 100 years of Southern lost cause enthusiasts and those who were descended from these now sanctified Confederate figures who have all written scads and scads of material on their lives, their stories, their participation, and their participation in the war. Almost every Ancestry.com user who has Joseph on their page has him listed as Major, like in all caps.
Of course.
With self-inserted notes about his bravery and so forth. And his Find a Grave memorial page is like a travesty of flash images of like Confederate flags waving and salutes and crosses from like modern day descendants coming to celebrate their relationship with this low-level officer who died on the losing side of a war to enslave people. And in a lot of ways, I think modern genealogy has become the next iteration of the lost cause. It's pretty common to see a descendant write or post their genealogical findings on a Confederate ancestor as a hero, noble, and gallant, and totally downplay slavery if it's mentioned at all, which we talked about earlier. And instead of erecting physical monuments, genealogy is building like memory monuments, if you will, through every descendant that continues to perpetuate the idea that Joseph Gillette was a good man because he was a soldier and he died in a war. It completely erases what he was fighting for and what he believed in. And the evidence of Joseph's life clearly shows that what he believed in, what he fought for with his life, was the right to enslave human beings. And because of that, I don't believe he deserves memorials or historical societies in his name or any of it. He's not a person worthy of praise. He's a person only worthy of our criticism. And while he's not my ancestor, he is a historical figure that continues to carry the torch of the lost cause very publicly. And this is a cause that is continuing to contribute to the oppression of Black people in this country and continuing to commit violence against them, both physical and psychological. And I think it's our responsibility to look at these figures and dismantle them and critique them for who they really were. So Joseph Gillette was a bad person. And if a single person asks me about it being a different time, it will blast off. He was bad then, he's still bad now. Just is a bad person. And it shouldn't be like controversial to say that. Have you ever owned another human being? If yes, then you're a bad person.
Yeah.
The litmus test is that simple.
Yes. The litmus test is that simple. It really is. Yeah.
Kim,
Ugh.
what's your resonance?
I'm so deflated.
I know.
I have 1,000 thoughts. So I think one of the things that I felt pretty early on in this episode was just disappointment that I don't talk to my family about this kind of thing. Not just the history and our ancestors, but the effects of all of that today, the side of the family that this is on. I have a pretty big family on that side. And so, getting together with them is often like catching up after a long time of not seeing each other. It doesn't feel like we often get into very, very deep discussions because there's just so many of us and, for whatever reason. And so there's just a feeling of disappointment of like, maybe I knew this, my memory is garbage, and it's very possible that I knew about some of this stuff. I think when I was in elementary school, I did one of those like family tree things, but we didn't go back super far. But it's never been talked about in the way that you and I can talk about it right now. And that's disappointing. And then it also gives me this feeling of like, I almost wish that I had like an ability to say there will be more of the McMasters and they're not going to believe that these things are okay. It's the kind of thing that I think you wish you had learned from the people that you grew up believing to be like the truth tellers and the safety keepers, your grandparents, your parents, etc. And that's not to say that I can't talk about these things with my parents, but I don't know how much they know. You did a deep dive. You did a deep, deep, deep dive. You got a lot of details that I think we probably don't have in our family, and now we have them. So it makes me feel very compelled to start having discussions about like, as distant as I feel from this person who is really crappy because they owned human beings.
Yeah.
As distant as I feel from them, they are part of my family, and what they did got me here.
Yes.
Period. So like, we can't ignore it. We can't ignore it. My family can't ignore it. I can't ignore it. We have to acknowledge it. We have to acknowledge where the disparities still are now. So there's a feeling of exhaustion, which I would imagine a lot of white people have felt, coming to terms with similar things, even, in the last couple of years. A feeling of like, woof, this sucks and it's uncomfortable, but we're going to dive in because if you don't, it goes quiet. And there's a great quote, and it might be a Brene Brown quote, which is going to be really embarrassing if I'm quoting Brene Brown, but something to the effect of like, shame swells in the darkness. And so if you're ashamed of this thing and you don't talk about it, you're going to continue to find ways to bury it because you don't want it to be seen. And then who knows what that could lead you to do that is also harmful. Whereas if you acknowledge something and you take accountability and you talk about it, you're far more likely to address and correct any behavior that is harmful to other people. So I'm going to talk about it.
Yeah.
But it makes me tired.
Yes.
It makes me tired, and it also makes me feel motivated. Like there's some work to do, I think, within my family and my immediate family. We've been having a lot of really, really like heavy but really productive conversations about the state of the world as it is currently. And with some of this information and being armed with some of this knowledge, I think it will just open up more things for us to talk about what we need to be doing to keep other people safe.
Yeah.
I'll keep it that simple. We don't need to go too much further.
I actually do really want to go back and say how much I liked how you talked about shame swelling in darkness, because I think in the interview that you did with me, I mentioned briefly that like not being able to sit in discomfort, not being able to come to terms with these really uncomfortable topics and the shame that comes with it, I think is why we have a swing of really like conservative voices, because they want to distance themselves so much from this uncomfortable truth. They refuse to think about it. They refuse to talk about it. If you bring it up with someone, be like, hey, this kind of sucked, you will be met with such vitriol of like, why are we even talking about this? It's not even a problem anymore. Like, stop trying to make me feel guilty about it. There's such a like fight or flight about sitting in even the like smallest amount of guilt related to this that is so unhelpful because it does not move the like society forward into an actual egalitarian society that takes care of everyone.
Yeah. And you know, if you're a person who maybe grew up thinking that racism wasn't an issue, and then you see the entire world essentially mobilize around the murder of George Floyd, then you're going to feel a lot of shame about whatever beliefs you hold that are contrary to what other people are feeling. And your mind can do crazy mental gymnastics to justify that if you're not willing to face the fact that you may be flawed and you might have other things that you need to learn. If you think that you are perfect, and if you think that you are the victim, or if you feel like, well, it's not fair that someone is saying that I'm racist because it's just what I was taught. You're just going to convince yourself that the beliefs that you hold that are harmful are okay. And if you isolate yourself as a result of that, it's just going to make things feel worse and worse. And you'll probably feel really strongly about being violent towards people who disagree with you.
This was heavy.
This was heavy. I'm glad we did it.
I'm really glad we did it. We knew that we'd have to get here. We're going to have more conversations like this because we have to. Let's go play video games and not think about this anymore.
That sounds great.
Okay.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye. Low Ancestry is written and produced by Karyn Harding and co-hosted by me, Kim McMasters, with original music and audio engineering by Benjamin Malk. Original cover art was designed by Christina Swanson of Swansong Creative. Resources pertaining to today's episode and a link to the official bibliography can be found in our show notes or at our website, lowancestry.com. All research was conducted by Karyn, but she's been known to be wrong on occasion. So if you'd like to connect with Karyn or even send her a correction, you can email us at connect@lowancestry.com or find us on Instagram @lowancestry. Genealogy is, after all, a community effort. Thank you so much for listening, and if you like what you hear, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We'd love to hear from you, and frankly, we really need this.